Okay, so welcome everyone to tonight's webinar, which is the bacteria that make you thin. And this webinar is all about all the research that's coming out showing that if you alter the bacteria in your gut, you will either make yourself gain weight or lose weight. It's pretty profound really that this can happen without you even changing your diet. And so tonight we're going to go through all the information. Not too technical. Last time I did it was a little bit, I think, technical. So I've tried to make it a little bit more simpler and accessible tonight. And we're going to go through how you can regrow them and then some tests that you can do to try and work out what the state of your microbiome, which is the gut bacteria, what the state of your microbiome is like and whether you've got a fat microbiome or a thin microbiome. Most people know me, but for those, there'll be those that don't. My name's Hayden Keys. I'm a naturopath. I've got a bachelor in health science, majoring in naturopathy. I went to uni back in the early 2000s and finished in 2005, graduated with distinction. Much earlier in my life, when I first left school, I did a degree in civil engineering, although I never became a civil engineer. So I've always liked the more numbers side and benchmarks to things. So when we come to the microbiome, when we come to, sorry about that, everyone. I was just trying to get to a chat, but somehow I lost it. No. Okay, not sure. My skills on this are not perfect, so sorry. I apologise if I'm a bit back and forwards. Yeah, so I trained as a civil engineer when I was much younger. I never liked it, so then I just went and worked until I knew or worked out what I did want to do when I grew up, which was to become a naturopath. So now that I am a naturopath, I really love what I do. I love food. I love herbs. I love looking at how we can make our body function better using the things that the planet gives us, and also how to recover our health. If we've lost our health and we've got some sort of chronic disease, how you can regain your health using herbs, vitamins, minerals, the bugs in your gut, rather than having to use medications. After I finished my degree, I did a couple of extra courses that have really helped me hone my skills and become a much more competent practitioner and really be able to discover what's going wrong with people and then be able to give them a really good treatment plan. So back in about 2012, I did a course with one of the world's sort of most renowned functional medicine doctors, Dr. Dan Kalish. So I trained in his course, and that gave me the principles that I use now in regards to the importance of gut health, the importance of stress, and the importance of balancing hormones, which when we think about the microbiome and its effect on the body, it covers all of those. And this is the most, I guess, incredible thing, even though since Greek times, doctors or medical people have been saying that the gut is the root of all disease, it still seems like a very recent thing because we're getting all this research coming out now validating all these old concepts. But for a lot of people, it's still very new that the gut is where all disease and all health starts from. So why should you listen to me? Besides being a naturopath, I've been practicing now for nearly 15 years. And because I guess my interest is in food and nutrition, I really specialized in weight loss or weight problems, losing weight, trouble losing weight, hormones that interfere with it, how stress interferes with it. Because I really love putting food together and showing people how to eat for health and how to turn things around with their foods, as well as then using those things to rebalance their hormones, rebalance their digestion. And given that I've been in practice now for quite a long time, I've seen over 3,000 people in my clinic, and during that time been very effectively helping them get their energy back, be able to shed stubborn weight, things that they've been, like weight that have been having real difficulties with getting rid of, getting their digestion working right, getting their hormones balanced, and just getting them feeling great again. So as I alluded to in the very beginning, what we're realizing now is that it's almost the bacteria that's the problem, not the food. There's been quite a few amazing studies in a way showing that weight can be manipulated without anything to do with diet. And so here we've got just two little snippets from some studies. One showing that when the poo was taken from one mouse and transplanted into another mouse, so one mouse was overweight, the poo was taken out of that, transplanted into a mouse that was thin. That thin mouse then became fat, even though there was no change in diet, and in the study, the thin mouse was actually even eating less. So this is quite a profound thing to understand if you've been struggling with your weight and you've been trying to eat less and less and less and having difficulty losing weight. Probably the reason is you've got the wrong balance of bugs in your gut. Another interesting study was where they took what are called germ-free mice, and these are mice that they specially breed that don't have any bacteria in them. There's no gut bacteria. And what they found is that those germ-free mice are leaner than mice with even just a normal balance of bacteria in the gut. But then if they inoculate those germ-free mice with a good balance of bacteria, they will still gain weight, like more weight than they had when they were not, when they didn't have any bacteria. And again, the mouse that had the bacteria was bigger, even though it was eating less. So these simple studies that have been done just on rodents are showing how important it is to get that balance right in terms of the weight and controlling weight, and for most people, the ability to lose weight. Now, when we get an imbalance in the good and the bad bacteria, that's what's called dysbiosis. So it's a dysfunctional gut microbial balance. This concept has been known for over 100 years now, and it was originally called dysbacteriosis. And it was identified by a guy called Eli Mechnikov in 1908. And he actually won a Nobel Prize for medicine for discovering that yogurt extended lifespan. So he looked at these cultures in Eastern Europe that ate yogurt, or something like kefir, which if you've heard of kefir before, which is a type of yogurt. People who ate that, or ate even just regular yogurt, lived longer than those that didn't. And he was able to work out that that was due to the bacteria that they were consuming. And so he wrote a book on that in 1908 called The Prolongation of Life, meaning just the extension of life. And he got a Nobel Prize for that. So that was 100 years ago. And here we are 100 years later discovering or rediscovering the same thing, even though it had already been brought to the scientific awareness a long, long time ago, but it just did nothing for a long time, probably because it served no one's purpose and there was no money in it. So besides bacteria extending life, if you have the wrong bacteria, well then that will shorten life as well. So when we think about the bugs in the gut, they can be affected by a whole range of different factors. There can be gene mutations, so certain people will have different genes, or those genes will function differently from person to person, and that can affect the bacteria, the balance of those in the gut. Obviously lifestyle, so diet, a low fiber diet, a high fat diet, a high protein diet, sweeteners, natural and artificial, including stevia, these can affect the balance of bugs. So while as we go through, or when we go through further on, we'll see that if you change the bacteria, you can change weight regardless of the diet. The wrong diet over a prolonged period of time will change the bacteria levels, and so then that will cause weight gain. So it does go both ways. And so generally, for most people, the diet they've been following, while they might have coped with it when they were younger, because a common comment I hear from patients is that when they were younger, they could eat whatever they wanted. And that was probably because their bacterial balance was better. They had a thin microbiome. But then the way they ate, because they thought they could eat anything, and when we were younger, we didn't really understand what was going on. We ate in a specific way, and then that changed the levels of bacteria over time, and that shifted the microbiome to like a fat microbiome. Now, stress can also change the microbiome, and studies have shown that stress suppresses lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. So these are two bacteria that most of us are familiar with. So they're the things that are often in yogurt. acidophilus and bifido. The stress hormones and emotional hormones of adrenaline and dopamine, these stimulate the growth of what we call gram-negative bacteria. And gram-negative bacteria produce things called endotoxins. So these are toxins that are produced from within you, which is what the endo means. So these toxins, things like LPS, lipopolysaccharide, which we'll talk a bit more about in a minute, these cause a lot of inflammation in the body, they stress the body, and they shift it into an insulin-resistant state, and then weight gain follows. Interestingly, anger and fear, so two more emotions, these increase a negative bacteria in the gut. So it's very interesting how the bacteria are not just shifted by what we eat, but also by how we feel. And then how we feel is also affected by the bacteria that you have in your gut. There's this huge connection between the bacteria, us, our emotional state, and the neurotransmitters and the signaling that the brain gets. So I was really fascinated when I saw these, when I came across these in a seminar just recently, that emotions have been actually shown in proper studies to affect the levels of different bacteria in the gut. Now, something that a lot of us have heard about these days, your balance of bacteria can be affected by where you were born and how you were born. So obviously, back in the day, us humans, we were born in a hut, we were born in the dirt, and even up until recently, we were probably even born at home, places where there were a lot of bacteria around. And so then once you were born, those bacteria were able to get onto you and get into you, and this is where you picked up a lot of the bacteria you had. And so this gave us a much broader range of bacteria, much higher diversity level of bacteria within the body. So if we think of the microbiome as a bit like a forest, there were lots and lots of different plants in that forest. It wasn't just a forest of eucalyptus trees. Now, in more recent times, there's been the rise in cesarean section births, and this has been known for a long time now to create a dysfunctional microbiome, and children born from cesarean section are much more likely to have allergies and a whole range of other immune associated problems. So the way we're born and where we're born affects the bacteria that get on us. So one of the reasons, in case you are unaware of it, why a cesarean section birth is not exactly as healthy as a vaginal birth is because when the baby passes out through the birth canal, it's very close to the anus, and so there's a lot of things going on during birth. There's a lot of pushing, there's a lot of fluids coming out, and so there's a lot of bacteria in that area, and that gets all over the baby, that gets into the mouth, and then the bacteria get down into the digestive system. So for a while now, when children are born by C-section, what they'll do is they'll take a swab of the mother's vagina and they'll rub it in the mouth of the baby to try and inoculate it with the bacteria. But what we're actually realizing is that the vaginal microbiome is completely different to the gut microbiome. And this might sound awful, but probably what should be done is they should be taking a swab of the anus as well and then putting that in the baby's mouth. Now that sounds really awful, but when a baby's born vaginally, it's getting a lot of feces and stuff on it anyway. So I'm sure that procedure will come soon. Now, medical practices are obviously really shifted our balance, our microbiome balance. Good old antibiotics. In the last, 70 years, antibiotics have been first-line treatment for so many different things. And even one course of antibiotics, even early in your life, can give you a permanent shift in your microbiome. Now, when you consider most of us have had more than one course of antibiotics, then this is part of the reason why we're ending up in the situation we are with these very dysfunctional microbiomes and dysbiosis as a result. Hygiene. Now, this is something I've been not struggling with, but playing over in my mind just recently. I was at a symposium about the gut just a while ago, and all the speakers were talking about our need to not be so clean. Because these days we're all very clean. We wash our hands regularly, everything's clean in the house. Some people might use antibacterial sprays. I don't use those sorts of things. But our places are very clean, everything's very clean, our food's very clean, and we're not picking up the bacteria that we used to. So back in the day, we'd go and get the food from the ground, we'd pull it out, there was dirt on it, there would be bacteria on it, we'd eat that food and then we'd consume it. Where these days everything's washed, everything's sterilized, and we're just not picking up the microbes that we want. The microbes that are left are actually much stronger, much more harmful because they can survive the antibacterial sprays, and that's why they become a lot more pathogenic and problematic for us. So all of these factors lead to dysbiosis. And this is how this all ties together. So with dysbiosis, meaning that dysfunctional balance of good and bad bacteria, we end up with what's called endotoxemia. So all these nasty bugs in the gut are giving off toxins like lipopolysaccharides, LPS, which then triggers inflammation. Others are giving off a chemical called beta-glucuronidase. Now this chemical here, what this does is basically it undetoxifies hormones and toxins coming out through your gut. So your gut is where you pass or you eliminate the hormones after they've been broken down, and it's where you eliminate a lot of the toxins or chemicals that have been in your body as well. So as they pass through the colon, they should just then pass right out of you into the toilet. But if you've got bacteria that make too much of this chemical here, what it will do is it will break apart the chemical bonds. It will basically then allow you to reabsorb the toxins and the hormones. And I've been talking a bit about estrogen dominance recently. So estrogen dominance is where your body builds up toxic levels of estrogen, and estrogen's a growth hormone. It will cause you to gain weight, hold fluid, and potentially trigger cancer. But a big reason why people are building up estrogen, men and women, is because they keep reabsorbing it through the gut. So when you get endotoxemia and it causes all this inflammation and estrogen excess, then you start to develop insulin resistance. So this happens because the liver becomes damaged and you build up this too high levels of estrogen. So as you start to become insulin resistant, your body's unable to burn fat as effectively, and it wants to store fat more strongly. And of course you start gaining weight, you start laying down fat, and you start laying it down in the liver. So that in itself starts to damage the liver, but then some of these toxins here are also absorbed into the body through leaky gut, and that damages the liver too. And then you start to see your liver enzymes elevate. So GGT, AST, ALT, these are enzymes that indicate how, in a way, healthy your liver is. Now, normally you're not going to see them extremely elevated, but if they're up above the reference range, while your doctor might not think that's too bad, it's showing that the liver is under stress, the liver is inflamed, it's being damaged, and this could be an indicator that you're developing a fatty liver and that you've got insulin resistance and you're on the pathway to obesity and then type 2 diabetes. So for a long time, type 2 diabetes was thought to be all due to too much sugar, too much carbs, but now we're actually realizing it's due to the wrong bacteria, and that's triggering the insulin resistance and the fatty liver. So it's not exactly the sugar and the carbs that are causing it, although eating too much sugar and too much carbohydrate, refined carbohydrate, will cause an imbalance of bugs, bad bugs, because you'll feed up the bacteria that love that, and unfortunately they're the ones that we don't want, and then that will trigger this whole process and set off this chain of events. So here we've got the bacteria that make you fat, basically. If you've got too many of these bacteria in your microbiome, then that's going to give you a fat metabolism. Okay, so this is where your metabolism wants to make you gain weight, not lose weight, no matter what you do. So E. coli, many people will have heard of. So some E. coli are actually okay, but a lot of them are actually quite nasty. They produce a lot of the LPS, endotoxin, which then causes inflammation, causes damage of the gut, leaky gut. Then you start getting the weight gain, the fatty liver, the insulin resistance, the type 2 diabetes. It's been associated, E. coli has been associated with excessive weight gain during pregnancy. And at the extreme end, all that inflammation can be what triggers colon cancer. Then we've got this bacteria here, Bilophila wadsworthia. So this this bacteria produces a lot of hydrogen sulfide, and while you need a little bit of hydrogen sulfide in the gut, too much of it becomes a toxin and it can kill the intestinal cells. It also has been linked in with things like colon cancer too, but too much of this is going to upset the gut, cause a lot of inflammation, and this will be part of the metabolic disturbance that happens and make it difficult for you to lose weight. One simple way of, I guess, understanding whether you've got too many of these bacteria is when you fart, it smells really bad. Okay, when your gut is not healthy or your diet is not well balanced, you're eating too much fat or too much protein, you get undigested fat and undigested protein coming through to the colon. These bacteria ferment it, and when you ferment protein, you get awful smelling gas. Whereas when you ferment fiber, you might be windy, but it won't be very smelly. Now over here we've got a bacterial species called Bacteroides. These are beneficial in low numbers, but as they start to build up, they can become a big problem because they're part of the gram-negative family. So they produce LPS endotoxin, and they're also a big producer of that chemical beta-glucuronidase, which triggers estrogen to be reabsorbed and can trigger estrogen dominance and toxic overload. One of the reasons why Bacteroides becomes a problem is because it's a very hardy bacteria. So whenever you have antibiotics, it doesn't really suffer too much. So as soon as the antibiotics finish, it just flourishes. And so over the years of having more and more courses of antibiotics, the Bacteroides levels start to get higher and higher and higher, and then they start to dominate. Anyone who's had chemo will often end up with a Bacteroides overgrowth as well, because chemo will tend to knock out all the sensitive friendly bacteria, but the Bacteroides can resist it. And of course, when all of this is happening, pretty quickly you're going to start developing insulin resistance and then weight gain. So here I've got an example for you of a blood test. This is electrolytes and liver function. So GGT, ALT, AST. And here we can see that the numbers are just pushing up out of the range. Not super high, but high enough. And if we see up here, we look at the glucose. So this will be looked at by a doctor and say, nope, you haven't got any problems with your blood sugars, probably don't have any problems with insulin resistance. But if we look at these three here, and you're not drinking too much alcohol, there's no reason for your liver enzymes to be high, then what this is saying is that most likely you've got endotoxemia from the wrong bacteria in your gut, and it's starting to affect your liver, and you're starting to move towards insulin resistance, fatty liver, obesity, and maybe potentially diabetes. So this is a very simple test you can get done with your GP, or if you had tests done recently, pull it out and have a look. And if you're seeing your liver enzymes either pushing up to the top end of the range or just outside, and you've been struggling with your weight, this is a good sign that you've got problems in your gut and you're shifting to the overweight metabolism. Here I've just thrown this little article in, this study, because for a long time everyone's been told to stop having sugar. So then there was artificial sweeteners like NutraSweet and saccharin and all these other sorts of things that have been coming out since I guess probably earlier than the 70s, but I'm from the 70s, 80s, and I remember those things as a kid. My nan having like a saccharin sweetener, and then during the 90s was the NutraSweet. Now, what they found is that even though these artificial sweeteners were meant to help with things like insulin resistance and diabetes and those sorts of things, what they've actually found is that artificial sweeteners will actually muck up the gut bugs and cause insulin resistance. So very interesting. And what's also been found that even stevia, and that's a natural sweetener, it's a plant from South America, it doesn't have sugar, it's not artificial, but it too has been shown to cause problems. And most likely what this comes down to is when people have a lot of these things. So they're using stevia all the time as opposed to just using it infrequently. Any sort of sweetener basically is going to disturb the microbiome. So the key there is to use them in very small amounts. You may be better off just using sugar and like an unrefined sugar like coconut sugar or palm sugar, something like that if you're going to use a sugar, or honey or maple syrup, but just not use too much of it, not too often, because even if they're calorie free, they're not any better for you. So just be aware of that. Key take home is there, just use the natural sweetness of fruits and vegetables to satisfy you. So what we can take from all that is, in a way, it's going to be impossible to lose weight long term if you've got the wrong gut bacteria. And this is most people's experience there, where they follow a program, they lose weight, but then over time their weight comes back and more. And basically it's because the microbiome is still the same, and so it's going to make you have problems. And this has actually been shown in studies. So a fat microbiome will persist after dieting. And so this is the reason why you're going to regain your weight, because you've still got the microbiome that's going to make your body regain the weight. It's not going to allow you to stay thin. And part of that reason is the microbes that are the ones that make you gain weight, they actually thrive during times of dieting. Okay, so those bacteria that are no good for your metabolism, they're very, very hardy, and they can survive on anything. And so even when you're restricting calories because you're thinking, okay, I need to cut my calories to lose some weight, or you're following the fast, 500 or 800 from Dr. Mosley, or you're doing paleo, or you're doing anything that's restricting your intake, the bacteria that are going to survive are the ones that can survive on fat, protein, just simple things. And unfortunately, they're not the ones you need. They're all the bad microbes. So dieting is not just bad because it puts you into a state of starvation, and that's bad for your thyroid and your adrenals, so your stress hormone levels, but it's also going to cause a die-off in the thin microbes and a flourishing of the fat microbes. And what we find is, and this is most people's experience too, is that the weight gain is faster and you end up more than what you were before. So someone will go down and then they come back up and they go past that point as well. And it wasn't so much to do with the food you moved back onto after you ate. It's all to do with what happened to the microbes while you're dieting. So if you want to change your weight permanently, you're going to need to change your gut bacteria. So a fat microbiome is associated with the following: low levels of bifidobacterium, low levels of Akkermansia. This is a type of bacteria. You won't find it in a probiotic at this stage, and probably long term it's not necessarily something that needs to go in a probiotic, but it is one of the main bacteria you need in your gut if you want to have a thin metabolism. So it's often seen in low levels with people with weight problems, as we often see low levels of lactobacillus. So think acidophilus when you think lactobacillus. Also low levels of this other bacteria, Faecalibacterium. So another bacteria that's strongly associated with positive effects in the gut, but people with weight problems and can't lose weight, they've usually got low levels of Faecalibacterium. Also, the gut is producing low levels of short-chain fatty acids. So that's what SCFA stand for. So short-chain fatty acids are what are created from fiber that you eat. The fiber comes through your gut. The gut bacteria digest it. They break it down. So when they're digesting it, basically they're fermenting it, and short-chain fatty acids are produced, as well as conjugated linoleic acid. Okay, so this is sort of like, think of flaxseed oil, omega-3s, those sorts of polyunsaturated fatty acids. So that's sort of what CLA is. But you'll make them, or your bacteria will make them, if you feed them right and if you have the right amounts. Short-chain fatty acids, so the A at the end is for acids. So when you produce a lot of these, it will make your colon acidic. Now, often we're always thinking these days about making ourselves alkaline. The actual colon needs to be acidic, and so short-chain fatty acids help keep it acidic, So, in someone with a fat metabolism or a fat microbiome, their colon pH is going to be neutral or alkaline. So that's a pH greater than 7. And there's also going to be high levels of the endotoxins like LPS, hydrogen sulfide, and beta-glucuronidase. So these are things that are associated with the fat microbiome. Now, to create a thin microbiome and a thin metabolism, we need to do the reverse. So we need to increase bifidobacterium, we need to increase Akkermansia, we need to increase Faecalibacterium, we need to increase lactobacillus, we need to increase short-chain fatty acid production, we need to reduce endotoxin production, and we need to stop the endotoxins like the LPS leaking into the body. So we need to repair the leaky gut. And that's what short-chain fatty acids do. Why they're so good is, one, they make the environment more acidic, and the good bacteria like an acidic environment. Those bad bacteria, the fat microbes, they don't like acid, they like alkaline. And a really good example of this is, say, yogurt or vinegar. So fermented products are actually old, they've been sitting around, but they haven't spoiled, they haven't gone rotten. And the reason for that is that there's bacteria in there making acids like lactic acid or acetic acid, and that high acid level of that food prevents pathogenic bacteria from growing. All right, so that's basically what's happening in the gut. If you've got the right bacteria and they're making a lot of these short-chain fatty acids, things like butyrate, propionate, to name a few, then it's going to create an acidic environment, and the bad bacteria can't grow. So just digging into a little bit more detail about the good bacteria. So bifidobacterium have been studied and have been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, which is why we want them. They've been shown to suppress endotoxin releasing bacteria. So we need more of them to push down the E. coli, the Bilophila Wadsworthia, and the Bacteroides. And they've been shown to heal the gut, so heal up that leaky gut. Akkermansia has been found in studies to be associated with better weight loss outcomes. So people with more Akkermansia have better outcomes with weight loss and lower body fat levels. And really interesting, in some studies where they actually introduced Akkermansia into obese and diabetic mice, it reversed those conditions. So suddenly they weren't obese and diabetic anymore from just changing the bugs. Akkermansia also manages the mucus layer of the gut, so it's important for gut health. And another really interesting study, and this shows where sometimes we don't actually even need live bacteria. So if you've cooked a fermented food, say yogurt in a curry, so the Indians often use yogurt in their curries, or we might make a soup with miso in it. This study showed that actually dead Akkermansia, so pasteurized, improved insulin sensitivity by 1/3, lowered insulin levels by 1/3, lowered cholesterol, decreased body weight, reduced hip circumference without any change in diet. So that was some people were just given that, and that's what happened without any sort of modification to anything else. Now for Faecalibacterium, that's been linked with better mood. And so I spoke a little bit earlier about how our mood is strongly influenced by the bacteria in the gut. So the more Faecalibacterium you have, often the better your mood will be. It's been shown to obviously, for what we're talking about tonight, improve obesity and diabetes outcomes. And it does a lot of this by suppressing gut inflammation that's triggered by endotoxins. Lactobacilli, which are famous for the Lactobacilli acidophilus, so our yogurts, they keep the colon acidic, and then that acidity suppresses the bad gut bacteria. So that's a pH less than 6.5. So how do we bring up the levels of these good bacteria? So one thing that's been studied a couple of times is cranberry extract. Not necessarily an easy thing to get, but actually just eating a lot of cranberries will still help you. And the reason why the cranberry extract works is because it's high in these things called polyphenols. So these are antioxidants, but the polyphenols are actually the pigments in fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and spices, so different plants. Those deep dark colors, they're the polyphenols. So polyphenols are actually a food for good bacteria, particularly Akkermansia. And so there's been these two studies here where they found a reduction or improvement in obesity and insulin resistance by giving a polyphenol-rich cranberry extract, and it was shown, or they also found during that there was an increase in akkermansia. So then a follow-up study was done, just measuring how well cranberry extract improved akkermansia levels. So if you like cranberries, even cranberry juice, unsweetened, so the cranberry juice is not just stopping bacteria adhering through the bladder. Those cranberry polyphenols are actually going to be boosting your akkermansia as well. So polyphenols, as I mentioned, are found in plant foods. So look for lots of bright colours. So the more colours, the better. That old concept of eating the rainbow, that's what you're looking for each day. So each meal, you're looking to have as many colours as you can, and as many different types of plant foods as you can. So fruits, vegetables, spices, nuts, seeds, beans, lentils, all these sorts of things. So when we think about the thin microbiome diet, this is what we're thinking about. High in fibre, high plant-based. Now, I don't think it needs to be totally plant-based. I do think animal protein is good, but a lot of people are eating too much of it. And when you eat more animal protein, you end up eating less plant-based food. Okay, so a big salad with lots of different colours in there. Some chicken on top of the big salad. Here we've got some quinoa, some beans, and a whole range of vegetables and some nuts. So trying to mix it up, get as many different things onto that plate as possible, and always having a good big serve, like a nice big bowl full of that. It's a very, very simple rule of thumb to follow. Just make sure you're having a big bowl food, a big bowl-sized serving of fruit and vegetables, along with your proteins. And just this last point here, lower fat. So for the last couple of years, there's been a big push towards increasing fat to control blood sugars, okay? Because in general, proteins and fats help with insulin levels and blood sugar control. But the problem we're finding with, if people are on that sort of style of eating for too long, when you increase your fat and your protein, as I mentioned earlier, you end up eating less plant food because you're full. So I know when I grew up, and this is probably a typical Aussie way to eat, is that we'd have like some protein, some starchy stuff like potatoes or rice or something like that, and then we'd have some vegetables, but we'd have a decent serving of protein, some of the starchy stuff, because we like those things and they fill us up. And so by the time you've eaten those, you're nearly full. So all you can eat is just a few vegetables. Well, you want to flip that around. You want most of your plate to be the veggies or the fruit, depending what meal it is. Eat all that first, and then you'll find you don't need to have as big a serving of the protein and you'll be full. And as big a serving of the starchy stuff, the quinoa, the rice, the potatoes, whatever it needs to be. You won't need as much of that because you're already quite full from eating the plant food, and you're feeding up all those important bugs, the Akkermansia, the Calibacterium, the Bifidobacteria. You're feeding them up and raising those levels. And as they go up, the bad bacteria comes down.
You disconnect to my... Sorry.
So someone can just mute themselves. That'd be good. All right, so as I just mentioned...
No, he's live.
Oh, turn your Bluetooth off, please.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, iPhone.
Karen, if you...
iPhone?
Just mute your phone there. Sorry, mute your little microphone. That's good. Cool. All right, so worst diet, just all protein, all fat. Because as we see here, if you ate all this, you're going to be pretty full. You're not going to be able to fit much on the vegetable side, and so you can maybe just fit in a little bit of spinach as a result. So as I said, I want a mushroom here too. It's not about not eating proteins. It's just about not eating a lot of protein and a lot of fat. Okay, you don't need to be low fat. We just want to be lower, or low protein, just lower. Good quality proteins. I think they're important, but you want to keep enough room to fit in all that fruit and veg and other plant material. Okay, so this is a little bit contrary to what we've been hearing for the last lot of years in terms of how to get your weight down, how do you control insulin resistance, how do you turn around diabetes, keto diets, paleo diets. They can be effective very short term, but if you continue them on after probably 2 to 3 months, maybe not even that, you're going to start to dramatically shift the bugs in your gut. All right, now what about probiotics and prebiotics? Can we take something to keep those good bug levels up, to sort of boost what we're doing with our diet, or to try and recover if we've got a low level of those sorts of things? Yes and no. So there aren't any commercially available specific weight loss probiotics yet, but they'll be coming because there's a lot of research into this, so they will be coming. There aren't any probiotics that have Akkermansia or Faecalibacterium in them, but that's okay, because if we eat the right foods and we treat our gut right, these two bacteria will start to grow themselves. Okay, so there's ways we can bring those up. So we don't need to be taking them. We need to just feed the ones that are there, and they will grow, and then they will then take over from the bad bugs. However, probiotics definitely have their place, but not just a simple probiotic. It needs to be combined with a prebiotic. And a prebiotic, if you've heard that term, or if you haven't heard that term, is just the food the bacteria eat. Okay, so the good bacteria, they need a food which is soluble fiber. That's what your plant food gives. But you can get probiotics called symbiotics, where it's got the probiotic and the prebiotic. And this is what I've always used in my clinic. So we have the gut ease probiotic, or I should say symbiotic, and it's good, and I've always used it, and we've always gotten fantastic results with all the different things we use it for, because it combines two actually research strains. So just not lactobacillus, but an actual specific strain of lactobacillus, an actual specific strain of bifidobacteria that have been shown to reduce inflammatory markers and be beneficial for your health. Because not all bifido and all acidophilus are the same and all actually help you, but these two strains have. And there's also inulin in there. So inulin is a soluble fiber, and inulin is one of the best foods for the bacteria in your gut. So the inulin that's in this symbiotic feeds the two bacteria, plus it's also feeding your Akkermansia and Faecalibacterium as well, which, as I've learned this more recently, now I understand why we see such good results with this, because it's not just the strains that the people are taking, it's the result the prebiotic in it also has on the bacteria that the person naturally has too. Okay, so this is a great type of probiotic, whereas you'd notice most probiotics are just in a capsule. That means there's no prebiotic with them, where this is a powder, because you need to be taking anywhere from 1 to 3 teaspoons, and that wouldn't fit in capsules to be able to get the bacteria and the inulin. On the food side of things, kombucha, it's all the fashion these days. But are all kombuchas the same? No, they're not. Like all probiotics aren't the same. So this brand here, Mojo, which you can find at supermarkets like Coles and Woolworths, that's where I buy mine from, these actually contain a specific strain of bacillus, which is just a type of bacteria, called GB 306086. Not that we need to know that. All we need to know is that actual specific strain of bacteria has been found to increase levels of Faecalibacterium. Okay, so drinking this particular type of kombucha will boost your level of thin microbiome microbes. Okay, so simple thing to do, have a glass of that with your dinner each night. So I like kombucha because it's like a healthy soft drink, or a healthy soft drink replacement, or soda if you're overseas. So looking for a kombucha that they actually list the bacteria that's in there, because a lot of them will say just culture. They won't actually tell you what's in there. So whether that culture is actually good for you may not be. It may make nice kombucha, but it may not actually help your gut. So that's a specific food